Man, so Don't Miss a Beat is really like my family's brainchild, and it kind of started kind of like you. Like the seed was planted years ago. I was on the road at Juilliard, and I was there with a bunch of students, and we got a chance to go to San Jose, Costa Rica, and
Mm.
we played at a cultural arts center. And I never forget, it was like we set up in this sort of auditorium, and it wasn't your typical audience. People weren't dressed in suits and ties, and it wasn't this elitist thing. It was like community people checking out the music. And that show was my favorite show on that whole tour because we played a bunch of different places. So at that moment, kind of like you, I lodged in the back of my mind like that feeling of the arts being presented in kind of a cultural moment and environment. So whatever. Fast forward, I graduated from Juilliard 2006. To really graduate, I had to really focus on my grades because there were a certain point where I was getting called to go on the road. Moger Miller was calling me. And I was kind of deciding, well, do I drop out? Well, when I decided that I wanted to stay in and get my degree, I basically went to all of those guys and said, hey, man, I love playing with you all, and I'm honored that you called me, but I got to get my grades, because I'm not doing
Yeah.
well in school. So anyway, so basically to graduate from school, I had to like focus on it, which meant I had to let go of a lot of my professional obligations, which means when I walked across the stage, I had no work.
Mm.
So I said, okay, what am I going to do? So I basically decided to go down to Jacksonville, come back home, and just figure it out. So I started a music school, which was actually called USO Jazzy School of Music. And I taught, a bunch of drummers, and I literally started from ages 8 until I had students that were in their 50s. And so I did that. And then also at that time, Jacksonville was really going through a lot of crime. And what they started doing was tracing the demographic where the crime was coming from. And typically it was children that basically had gone to school, weren't doing well in school, got suspended, and then they basically dropped out because by the time they went back to school, they were not really caught up in their work.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did was we created an organization that those kids would come to us while they were suspended. They would make sure their homework and all that stuff was caught up. And then when they went back, they would be able to continue and graduate, and they wouldn't miss a beat. So that's what Don't Miss a Beat.
Got it.
However, we didn't get the grant. So we formed this organization, and the city was just like, thanks, but no thanks. So we're just like, oh, shoot, we have this 501c3 organization. We've got, we had basically spent about a year putting all this together, but we had no program. So being the tenacious folks that we are, my mom went down to what was then the Jacksonville Children's Commission. And she said, okay, I need to find a program. So there were bids for summer camp. So my mom called me and said, hey, what would you do with a summer camp? And I said, okay, well, what if we put kids in a gymnasium? We taught them a bunch about the arts. And then, hey, at the end, we put on our own musical. Well, the city loved it. We got approved. So Don't Miss a Beat started in 2008, literally in what's called the Hollybrook Project. So it'll be, equivalent of any project development, housing projects. So we started, man, and by the end of the 8 weeks, these kids who had never been exposed to the arts put on their first original musical. We got the entire community involved. We even had people who were considered the bullies of the neighborhood or dregs of society. They were helping us teach kids and all that. I mean, it became this unified thing. And the city was just like, oh my God, we love what you did. Can you go do it at another neighborhood? And so here we are now, man, 12 years later, we have 2 community art centers. We still have our flagship summer camp. We just had our finale last week. We have an after-school program. We also have an Academy of Arts, which offers free arts instruction to what I love to call At Hope Kids. So, man, it's a full thing. We have tons of partners. We're partnered in with all the colleges. Our kids have traveled as far as Paris and performed. They've been to New York and performed. So we're 12 years old now, man. It's a fully running engine. And I have to tell you, it is probably, in my mind, it's the most important thing I think I've ever done. I mean, I think being a musician is great, but it's incredibly self-absorbed and selfish, I think, because it's all about your own thing. But Don't Miss a Beat is bigger than me. And I always like to say, Maya Angelou had this quote. She says, we don't get to choose what our legacies are, right? Our legacies really becomes defined by the work that we do and where we put our energy. And I really think that Don't Miss a Beat is going to be an important part of my legacy because I'm really making sure that success is putting into someone else's life and really making them better. And sort of lastly, another mentor said to me, there is no success without a successor. And so I really feel that my ability to be able to create a program to give kids the opportunity to dream and be better is really what success is about. So I really feel like I hit my vein doing this work. So that's a little bit of what it is, man. It's a full-time job. I'm artistic director. It's family-run organization, but then, you know, I mean, I have a staff of probably 30, 40 people. But it started as just 5 people.
The family's getting big. The family's getting big.
You know, so
yeah, man.
Yeah. So anyway, that's Don't Miss a Beat in a, you know, nut.
Well, that's amazing. And I became aware of the organization also through just the fact that, you know, me and my siblings went to University of North Florida. So
yeah.
Then a majority of our, you know, we were in Jacksonville for about 4 years and started to understand what was going on in the larger community outside of the university. One thing that I found, you know, you've talked about this organization many times, but one thing I think, especially now where there's a lot of things changing and there's a lot of questions about the importance of, I mean, it's been a constant discussion, but I think you firsthand can speak to the music and its effects on not just the local communities, but the actual individuals and the ability to change the direction of their lives.
Yeah.
What have you seen, or what is something that maybe one particular thing that stands out as that showed you the true impact of what putting music and the arts first in these local communities can have on, that sorts to then not solve, but also really just points the whole community and culture in a different direction. You know, we talk a lot about the negativity aspect, but I think I just want to illuminate some of the positives that are coming out when we're putting the arts first, when you have organizations. What have you seen has been an impact from that?
Well, man, I got to first tell you, bro, like you got to think about what we're living in right now is a global pandemic, and we're living in what I like to call a race awakening, right? So we are now being awakened to the fact that we aren't as unified as we thought we were. And we're now also being awakened to the fact that we can't even walk out our front door without a mask on. What makes the art so powerful is that during my summer camp for 6 weeks, I saw kids who had been depressed because they had been home from school. I also saw kids who had lost relatives to the pandemic. I'd also seen kids who their parents lost their jobs. So literally they were struggling and our organization had to pitch in. They ignored all of what was their reality and they focused it on this arts focus or curriculum, you know, the show that we had. We had a cabaret show. And so it was amazing to see kids were leaving a home where either they had been quarantined or leaving a home where, you know, they have an uncle that was in the hospital or leaving a funeral even. And they would come to our community center. Obviously, you know, we made sure everything was safe and kids were being tested and face masks and all that. But either way, they came there and for 6 weeks, they forgot about what was going on. And I think that is what the arts have the power to do, is distract you, but with a positive focus. And as a result of it, these kids, you know, most kids are ending the summer being like, oh my God, I hate my life. And now I got to figure out how to go back to this sort of quarantine school experience. My kids ended the summer having been awarded for being good at something, having learned to, you know, soak themselves into a character. They learned a song, they learned choreography. You know, they also were embraced and loved by our staff. You know, they also had some time with each other. I had literally guest artists every week. You know, I had people coming in that were professors of programs, speaking life into these kids. So I think to your point, what I saw is that the arts have the ability to distract kids in a healthy way and let them know that there is a life beyond their reality. And there is no other thing to me or no other entity or power or force that has that ability. You know, because even sports right now, you can't even really do that because of the close contact and again, the pandemic. But the arts to me, you know, were powerful because I could literally send an August Wilson book home with one of my kids. And like I had this one kid, man, he actually is medicated because of ADD and some things. Anyway, this kid who everybody felt they couldn't do anything with, you know, he's under 12 years old. And I said, well, this kid is smart. So he did a monologue for me. After his monologue, I said, man, how did you learn that? I'm like, you know, they say that you have some issues medically. He's like, oh, I just memorized it. So I said, okay, man, here's a book on August Wilson. I gave him the play Jitney. Do you know, bro, he literally read it in like 2 hours. This is an adult play. Like he read it in 2 hours and then the next day he memorized all of his lines. Yeah. So I say that to say like the arts gave him an ability to find his empowered self versus he walked in my camp thinking he was a kid with ADHD and all kind of problems and had medications to sort of co-sign that. He walked out saying, man, I'm an actor, and now I have the arts, and now I can memorize things. And Mr. Owens and his team now recognize some abilities within me. Nothing else has the power that has. You know.
And I think you're right. I think you're speaking to the power that it's able to. They're able to channel the energy, all these negative emotions that understandably are occurring right now. You know, I have students who parents are coming to me and telling me, you know, Mr. Maddox, my kids are literally showing signs of depression. Right. And that's a new aspect I have to kind of manage in my studio and understand how can what I'm doing in piano class or whatever really change that element is something I'm having to think about. But your organization is doing that. And like you said, with that student, it sounds to me, and my experience with kids when it's often associated with they can't focus. Their attention's too. It actually turns out they're just not challenged. To the level they need to be. They actually need to be challenged harder than maybe some of the other kids in class. And the arts, as we know, it will never stop challenging you in the fact that you can keep growing in it. So I think that's, you're pointing out a perfect example.